All right, guys, so let's go ahead and let's start talking about this rectus sheath. And this material is going to kind of clear up, for lack of a better term, the material that we covered on Monday. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to draw in just a couple key landmarks. Okay, so up at the top of the screen is going to be the deepest layer, and down here at the bottom of the screen is going to be the most superficial layer. The deepest layer we're going to have is going to be something called the parietal peritoneum. Moving superficial from there, what we're going to see is we're actually going to have the transverse fascia. And then we're going to start running into, quote, our muscles, right? So the deepest muscle we're going to have is going to be TA, which is going to be transverse abdominis. Then moving more superficial, we're going to have internal abdominal oblique, IAO. Then moving more superficial, we're going to have EAO. And that's going to be external abdominal oblique. Now, right in the middle of this whole mess, if you will, we're going to draw in our rectus abdominis. Now, remember, what we're looking at here is a cross section. Okay, so if I kind of took, a scalpel and cut right into the abdomen, we're looking at a cross section here. So we're going to draw in two RA muscles. And that's going to stand for rectus abdominis. So what we're first going to draw here, and let's complete the picture before we do anything else. So the more superficial moving from there, we're going to have a layer of subcutaneous tissue. And then we're going to have, most superficially, obviously, our skin. Okay. So what we're going to have here, what we're first going to draw is we're going to draw above the arcuate line. So above the arcuate line, what we're going to see is that the TA, the transverse abdominis fascia, is going to ride deep or posterior to rectus abdominis. The IAO fascia, internal abdominal oblique, is going to split. Half of it is going to ride deep, and half of it is going to go superficial. EAO is going to stay superficial. So this is the representation of the rectus sheath above the arcuate line. When we move on to below the arcuate line, okay, so the second picture is going to be below the arcuate line. Again, we're going to put the deepest structures at the top of the screen and the most superficial structures at the bottom of the screen. We're still going to draw in our parietal peritoneum. We're still going to draw in our transverse fascia. And we're still going to draw in our muscle. Okay, so we're still going to draw in, here's PA, here's IAO, there's EAO, and then right in the middle, we're going to draw in RA. So what we're going to have below the arcuate line is a little different representation. Okay, the first one I'm going to draw in here is going to be the EAO. So EAO is going to stay superficial, rectus abdominis. IAO, the entire fascia, will stay superficial to rectus abdominis. TA will also all the way around, and it'll stay superficial to the rectus abdominis. When you look at your cadavers, this is a big reason why when you get distal, or I should say more accurately, inferior to the umbilicus, the fascia looks a lot thicker. And the reason the fascia looks a lot thicker is because we now have 3 layers of fascia that are in front of or superficial to rectus abdominis. So like I said, that picture should clear things up. Obviously, the color should help out quite a bit. The other thing I wanted to go over was the blood supply to the anterior abdominal wall. Okay, so this next picture is going to be this will be the blood supply to the anterior abdominal wall. So blood supply to the anterior abdominal wall, to be perfectly honest with you, is not terribly difficult. We're not going to see a ton of branches. We're just going to see a lot of branches that we've already talked about. There will be a couple new branches, but there's not going to be a ton of different branches coming in from all sorts of places. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to draw in the sternum. Okay, so there's my sternum. There's my xiphoid process. And then from there, what we're going to do is we're going to draw in. I'm only going to draw on one side here so it doesn't confuse the picture too much. That's going to be indicative of my rib cage. Now understand that this blood supply is going to happen on both sides. Okay, so I'm going to have a right side and a left side. Okay, and that's going to be very important to remember because I just have to recognize the fact that I'm going to have 2 different blood supplies. Now, what makes this a little more difficult, I think, to understand than the upper extremity is the fact that it's so close together. instead of, for example, the right brachial artery and the left brachial artery are pretty far apart. What we're going to see, in fact, is that the right internal thoracic and the left internal thoracic are only about 1.5 inches away from one another, but they ride on the right side of the sternum and the left side of the sternum, respectively. So the first thing we're going to draw in here is going to be the internal thoracic artery. Okay, so internal thoracic artery is going to come down. Okay, so this is going to be my internal thoracic artery. Once the internal thoracic artery gets inferior to the rib cage, it's going to split off in 2 different branches. Okay, it's going to split off branch here, let's split off another branch going out a little more laterally. The branch that's going to go essentially in a sagittal plane direction, traveling from superior to inferior, is going to be the superior epigastric. This other branch that comes off the internal thoracic is going to be named literally based on where it goes. This one is going to be called the musculophrenic artery. Now, you probably already realize and recognize that when I see phrenic, I probably think phrenic nerve. When you're exactly right and probably guessing where that artery goes. That artery is going to end up going up to the diaphragm. The other structure that we're going to draw in here, and we're going to draw this kind of very quickly and easily, is we're going to draw in essentially very quick representation of the inguinal canal. Because this is going to be another huge marker. This is going to be one of those big borders that's going to end up causing structures to change names. So I'm going to have another artery that comes off of the common iliac artery. Okay, so I'm going to draw over on the side here a little kind of graphical representation. Okay, so the aorta is going to branch into the right common iliac and a left common iliac. That left common iliac, and this is going to happen on both sides, is going to have an external branch, so an external iliac, and an internal iliac. That's the very basic representation. The external iliac is going to end up essentially becoming my femoral artery after it passes the inguinal canal. Okay, so here's how kind of it works. Okay, so I'm going to draw a cut version of my external iliac artery. After that external iliac artery travels distal to the inguinal canal, it's now going to be called the femoral artery. That external iliac artery, however, is going to give off a big branch that's going to end up anastomosing with the superior epigastric. And it's going to be called my inferior epigastric. The femoral artery as well is going to give off a really, really super quick branch. That's going to end up traveling up, basically kind of travels back up towards this area, this abdominal area. And that's going to be called my superficial epigastric. And I understand I'm kind of squeezing that one in there. My femoral artery will continue down. In addition to all of this, what we're going to see is that we're actually going to have intercostal arteries coming in as well. And these are all going to be named based on where they're exiting. So this would be the 10th intercostal artery, the 11th, and actually, you know, let me color those in so it looks a little neater, so you can kind of see the separation. So I have a 10th intercostal artery, I have an 11th intercostal artery, and then I'll have a 12th intercostal artery. And in fact, the 12th, quote, intercostal artery is not really called an intercostal artery. I'll write this out here on the side here. The 12th, and we're going to learn this both at the artery and the nerve. This is going to be called subcostal. And the reason is because if you really think about it, the word inter means between, and the word sub means under. So it's kind of hard to have an intercostal artery when you don't have another costal for it to go in between. That's why it's called the subcostal. Okay, so hopefully that makes some sense, but that's basically the blood supply to the anterior abdominal wall.